My name is Emily Bennett, 29, and 2 weeks ago I stood alone at my own wedding reception, watching as half the seats remained empty. The carefully arranged place cards for my parents, sister, and extended family sat untouched on pristine white tablecloths. "If your sister isn't invited, we're not coming either." Those words from my father still rang in my ears as I looked at my new husband across the room. Little did my family know that their ultimatum would trigger a sequence of events that would change our family dynamic forever. Before I dive into this family drama that exploded into my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you enjoy real-life family drama with unexpected twists. Trust me, you'll want to see how karma finally caught up with my perfect sister and parents who always took her side. Growing up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I was always the responsible one. From a young age, I was taught to be practical, hardworking, and self-reliant. My parents, Richard and Diana Bennett, ran a successful law firm together and expected excellence from their daughters. My father, with his imposing presence and meticulous attention to detail, commanded respect in both the courtroom and at our dinner table. My mother, equally ambitious but warmer in her approach, balanced his sternness with occasional affection. They created a home where achievement was celebrated above all else. Then there was my younger sister, Melissa. 3 years my junior, she entered the world with what seemed like a divine mandate to be the family favorite. With her effortless charm, stunning looks, and natural talent for manipulating situations to her advantage, Melissa easily secured her position as the golden child. While I studied diligently to earn my straight A's, Melissa would flash a smile and charm her teachers into overlooking missed assignments. When I saved my allowance for months to buy something I wanted, Melissa would casually mention an item during dinner, and our parents would present it to her the next day. "Emily, why can't you be more like your sister? She has such a way with people," my mother would often say, seemingly oblivious to how those words cut through me. My father would simply nod in agreement, his eyes reflecting pride when they landed on Melissa and subtle disappointment when they turned to me. Despite the favoritism, I maintained a relationship with my sister throughout our childhood and teenage years. We shared a bathroom, clothes, usually mine that she'd borrow without asking, and occasionally, genuine moments of sisterly connection. I convinced myself that blood ties were important, that family loyalty should transcend the petty jealousies and inequities that characterized our relationship. After high school, I pursued a degree in engineering at the University of Wisconsin, while Melissa, predictably, followed our parents' footsteps into law school. During college, I found my footing away from my family's shadow. I excelled academically, made real friends who valued me for who I was, and eventually met James during my junior year. James was studying architecture, with dreams of designing sustainable buildings that would make a positive impact on communities. Thoughtful and kind, he was the first person who seemed to see me completely, not as the less favored daughter or Melissa's less charismatic sister, but as Emily, intelligent, caring, and worthy of love in my own right. Our relationship blossomed over late-night study sessions, weekend hiking trips, and long conversations about our hopes for the future. After graduation, James and I moved to Chicago for our respective careers. I joined an engineering firm specializing in renewable energy projects, while James secured a position at a progressive architectural firm. Melissa, meanwhile, graduated from law school with honors and joined our parents' firm, completing the perfect family narrative they had always envisioned. For the next few years, I maintained obligatory contact with my family, holiday visits, occasional phone calls, and the annual Bennett family vacation. Each interaction reinforced the established dynamic. Melissa's achievements were celebrated lavishly, while mine were acknowledged with polite but lukewarm interest. James witnessed this treatment firsthand and struggled to understand how I continued to accept it. "They're still my family," I would explain after particularly difficult visits. "It's complicated, but they're all I have." James would shake his head. "They're not all you have. You have me. You have friends who actually appreciate you. And someday we'll have our own family, one where everyone is valued equally." The turning point in my relationship with my sister came 3 years ago, at my parents' 30th wedding anniversary celebration. They had rented an elegant venue and invited nearly 100 guests, colleagues, friends, and family members from across the country. I had taken time off work and spent weeks helping my mother with arrangements, from selecting the catering menu to designing the commemorative photo album that would be displayed at the event. The night of the celebration, as guests mingled and champagne flowed freely, my mother stood to make a toast. She spoke lovingly about her marriage, her career, and then turned to acknowledge her greatest achievements, her daughters. "Richard and I are so blessed," she said, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "Our daughter Melissa has followed in our footsteps, becoming an exceptional attorney who makes us proud every day. She recently won her first major case and has been featured in the Wisconsin Legal Review as a rising star to watch." Applause erupted, and Melissa stood, graciously accepting the praise with a practiced smile. My mother continued, "And of course, we're proud of Emily too, who's doing well in her technical job in Chicago." That was it. My years of hard work, my recent promotion to lead engineer on a groundbreaking sustainable energy project, reduced to a technical job mentioned as an afterthought. I felt James's hand tighten around mine as he sensed my hurt. Later that evening, I overheard Melissa speaking to a group of my parents' colleagues. "Emily always was the practical one," she was saying with a light laugh. "Mom and Dad tried to encourage her toward law or medicine, something with prestige, you know? But she insisted on that engineering thing. At least her boyfriend, James, I think, seems nice. Someone should take care of her, I suppose." I stood frozen behind a decorative column, the champagne flute in my hand trembling slightly. The casual dismissal of my career, my relationship, my entire life path cut deeper than any previous slight. James found me minutes later, tears silently streaming down my face. "I heard," he said quietly, pulling me into an embrace. "Let's go home." That night, after we returned to our hotel room, James proposed. It wasn't the grand gesture he had planned for the following weekend, the romantic dinner, the rooftop view of Chicago, the photographer he had hired to capture the moment. Instead, it was intimate and perfect, just the two of us, with James on one knee beside the hotel bed, holding a ring and promising to build a life with me where I would always be valued. "I don't need you to cut ties with your family," he said as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "But I need you to know that you deserve better than how they treat you. You deserve to be celebrated, Emily. You deserve to be seen." As we fell asleep that night, I made a decision. I would maintain a relationship with my family, but I would establish stronger boundaries. I would no longer contort myself to fit their expectations or accept being relegated to the shadows of Melissa's glory. Little did I know that this resolution would be tested sooner and more dramatically than I could have imagined. James and I spent the next year planning our wedding, a tasteful autumn ceremony at a renovated industrial space in Chicago that reflected both our personalities. I wanted a celebration that felt authentic to who we were, warm, inclusive, and without pretension. We decided on a guest list of 120 people, including close friends, colleagues, and family members from both sides. When it came time to address my sister's invitation, I hesitated. Our relationship had grown increasingly strained since my parents' anniversary. Melissa had made little effort to connect, canceling our occasional lunch plans at the last minute and responding to my messages with delayed, perfunctory replies. During the few family gatherings we both attended, she seemed more interested in showcasing her latest achievements than engaging in genuine conversation. "Are you sure you want to invite her?" James asked gently one evening as we sat at our dining table, address lists and invitation samples spread between us. "Every time you interact with her, you end up feeling hurt." I sighed, turning the embossed sample card between my fingers. "She's my sister. If I don't invite her, my parents will be upset. This is our wedding, not your parents' social event. It should be filled with people who love and support us." I nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words, but the years of conditioning of placing family obligation above personal well-being were difficult to overcome. "Let me think about it," I said finally. 3 months before the wedding, I received a call from my college friend Natalie, who worked at a prestigious law firm in Milwaukee. Her voice sounded strained when she asked if we could meet for coffee during my upcoming visit to see my parents. "There's something you should know," Natalie said when we settled into a quiet corner of the cafe. "It's about Melissa." According to Natalie, my sister had been representing a client in a property development case against the firm where Natalie worked. During negotiations, Melissa had somehow obtained confidential documents that gave her client an unfair advantage. What's worse, Natalie had reason to believe these documents came from my email account. "Remember when you visited your parents last Christmas and used their home computer to check your work email? The timing matches. And some of the compromised information relates directly to the renewable energy project you're working on." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's impossible. Melissa wouldn't. She couldn't have accessed." But even as I protested, memory surfaced, Melissa hovering near me as I logged in, asking casual questions about my work, showing uncharacteristic interest in my engineering projects. And later, my work computer alerting me to login attempts from an unrecognized device. "The case has been settled now," Natalie continued, "so there's nothing to be done legally. But I thought you should know. This crosses a professional line, Emily. It could have seriously damaged your career." I left the cafe in a daze, my mind racing. When I confronted Melissa that evening at our parents' house, she initially denied everything with practiced indignation. But as I presented the evidence, the timing, the specific documents that had been compromised, the suspicious login attempts, her demeanor shifted. "It's not that big a deal," she said finally, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "The case is settled, nobody got hurt, and, honestly, it's not like you would have used that information for anything important. My client's development project will benefit the entire community." "You violated my privacy," I said, my voice trembling. "You potentially compromised my professional reputation. You used me." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. We're family. Resources should be shared." "Shared? You stole confidential information from me to win a case. I did what needed to be done. That's how the real world works. Mom and Dad would understand. They've always taught us to seize opportunities." In that moment, something broke inside me, the last thread of the illusion that my sister cared about me as anything more than a resource to be exploited. When she reached for her wine glass with a dismissive shrug, I made my decision. "You're not invited to my wedding," I said quietly. Melissa's hand froze midair. "Excuse me. You heard me. I don't want you at my wedding." She laughed, a cold, incredulous sound. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course I'll be at your wedding. I'm your sister, your only sister. What would people think?" "I don't care what people think. I care about being surrounded by people who respect me, who haven't betrayed my trust for their own gain." Her expression hardened. "Mom and Dad won't stand for this. You're causing unnecessary drama as usual." "This isn't drama, Melissa. This is a consequence of your actions." I left the room without waiting for her response, my heart racing, but my resolve firm. Later that night, I explained everything to James during a tearful phone call. He listened patiently, then said simply, "I'm proud of you, Em. It's about time you stood up for yourself." The next morning, my parents cornered me in the kitchen. My mother's face was pinched with displeasure, my father's set in stern disappointment, expressions I was all too familiar with. "Melissa told us about your ridiculous tantrum," my mother began. "I understand you're stressed about wedding planning, but to uninvite your sister over some perceived slight is unacceptable." "It wasn't a slight, Mom. She accessed confidential work documents from my account to win a case." My father waved his hand dismissively. "All's fair in law, Emily. If you weren't so careless with your login information, there wouldn't be an issue. Besides, the case is settled. Moving forward is what matters now." I stared at them, incredulous. "So you're saying it's my fault Melissa violated my privacy and potentially put my career at risk?" "We're saying you're overreacting," my mother replied. "Family comes first. Always. Melissa is your sister, and she will be at your wedding." "No," I said firmly. "She won't. This is my decision, and it's final." My father's face darkened. "Then you leave us no choice. If your sister isn't invited, we're not coming either." "That's final." Consider carefully, Emily, my mother added, her voice softening into the manipulative tone she often used when she wanted her way. A wedding without your parents. What would that say about our family? What would people think? They might think I finally found the courage to stand up for myself, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. They might think I value respect more than appearances. The ultimatum hung between us, altering the very fabric of our family dynamic. As I packed my bags to return to Chicago that afternoon, I realized there was no going back. The wedding would proceed in 3 months' time, with or without the family I was born into. News of my decision spread through the extended family like wildfire. Within days, my phone was inundated with messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins, some expressing concern, others outright condemning my choice to exclude Melissa. "Blood is thicker than water," wrote my father's sister, Aunt Patricia, in a lengthy email. "Whatever disagreement you girls are having, it can't possibly justify breaking your mother's heart this way." My maternal grandmother, usually my strongest ally in family disputes, called to gently suggest that perhaps I was being a bit harsh. When I explained the full situation, Melissa's breach of trust, my parents' dismissal of my concerns, there was a long pause on the line. "I see," she finally said. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't know. Your mother only said you and Melissa had a falling out over wedding details." "They're minimizing what happened," I replied, fighting back tears. "They always take her side." "Well," my grandmother said, her voice gaining a rare edge of steel, "I raised my daughter better than to abandon one child for the sake of another. I'll be having words with Diana. And Emily? I'll be at your wedding, with or without your parents." That small victory gave me courage, but the situation continued to deteriorate. A week after my confrontation with my parents, I discovered that my mother had contacted our wedding venue, attempting to add Melissa to the guest list without my knowledge. The event coordinator, confused by the conflicting information, had called to confirm my preferences. "She claimed to be helping you with last-minute changes," the coordinator explained awkwardly. She was quite insistent. I was furious, but not surprised. My mother had always been skilled at circumventing boundaries she didn't agree with. I immediately called her, my hands shaking as I dialed. "How dare you go behind my back," I said as soon as she answered. "It's my wedding, my guest list." "I was trying to save you from making a terrible mistake," she replied, unrepentant. "This ridiculous feud has gone on long enough. You're tearing the family apart over nothing." "It's not nothing to me," I insisted. "And interfering with my wedding plans isn't going to change my mind. It only confirms that you don't respect my decisions. Because your decisions are childish. You've always been this way, Emily, stubborn and oversensitive. Melissa is willing to move past this. Why can't you? Melissa hasn't apologized. Neither have you or Dad. None of you have acknowledged that what she did was wrong. Because we're focused on what's important, family unity. Something you clearly don't value." The conversation ended with neither of us conceding ground. Immediately afterward, I contacted every vendor involved in our wedding, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the DJ, and implemented password protection for all arrangements. I felt ridiculous taking such precautions against my own mother, but I couldn't risk further interference. James, witnessing my distress, suggested we consider eloping. We could go to the courthouse this weekend, he offered one night as I sat at our kitchen table, rubbing my temples after another draining phone call with a relative. Just us. No drama. The offer was tempting. The joy of planning our wedding had been thoroughly tainted by family conflict. But something in me resisted giving up the celebration we had envisioned. "No," I said finally. "I won't let them take this from us too. We're having the wedding we want, with the people who truly support us." As the weeks passed, the pressure intensified. My father employed a different tactic than my mother's direct interference. He attempted to leverage financial control, calling to remind me that they had offered to contribute to the wedding expenses. "That offer is contingent on a family celebration," he said, his lawyer voice in full effect. "If you persist with this divisive behavior, we'll have to reconsider our financial commitment." I had anticipated this move. "We've never accepted your money, Dad. James and I are paying for the entire wedding ourselves." We always plan to. There was a telling pause. Well then. I suppose you've thought of everything. I learned from watching you and Mom. Always have a contingency plan, right? 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a formal-looking envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from my parents' law firm, detailing the items they had supposedly purchased for my wedding, a specific tier of the catering package, the floral arrangements, the string quartet for the ceremony, with a demand for reimbursement since they would no longer be attending. I showed the letter to James, who contacted his cousin, an attorney in Chicago. "This is absurd," his cousin said after reviewing the document. "They can't prove they made these purchases specifically for your wedding, especially since you have receipts showing you paid the vendors directly. It's an intimidation tactic, nothing more." Still, the letter achieved its intended effect. I was shaken, not by the financial threat, but by the realization that my parents were willing to involve their firm, to bring professional resources to bear against their own daughter, rather than respect my decision. The final blow came 10 days before the wedding. Melissa's best friend and maid of honor, Laura, caught me leaving my office building in downtown Chicago. I had known Laura since childhood. She had been a constant presence in our home, practically another Bennett daughter in my parents' eyes. "Emily, wait," she called, hurrying across the plaza. "I need to talk to you." I paused reluctantly. "I'm late for a final dress fitting, Laura. Whatever Melissa sent you to say." "She didn't send me," Laura interrupted, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "She has no idea I'm here. Actually, she'd be furious if she knew." Curious despite myself, I gestured to a nearby bench. 5 minutes. Laura sat beside me, fidgeting with the strap of her designer handbag. "I've been Melissa's friend forever, you know that. I've always taken her side. But what she's planning, I can't be part of it." My stomach clenched. "What is she planning?" "She's coming to your wedding anyway. Your parents too. They've convinced half the family that the only way to end this is to show up on the day, creating a situation where you can't possibly turn them away without causing a scene. Melissa even had replica invitations made." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "They would crash my wedding? After everything?" Laura nodded miserably. "Melissa keeps saying it's for your own good, that you'll thank her later for preventing you from making a mistake you'd regret. Your mom is coordinating with the relatives. They're planning to arrive just before the ceremony starts." The audacity was breathtaking. Yet somehow I wasn't surprised. This was the logical culmination of a lifetime of having my boundaries ignored, my wishes overridden, my autonomy dismissed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked Laura. "You're risking your friendship with Melissa." She looked away, then back at me with unexpected sincerity. "Because it's wrong. And because I saw the documents on Melissa's computer. The ones she took from your account. I know what she did. It wasn't just bending the rules, Emily. It was unethical, possibly illegal." She stood to leave. "I should go. I'm sorry it took me this long to say something." As Laura walked away, my mind was already racing, forming a plan. If my family wanted to play hardball, they were about to learn that the overlooked daughter had learned more from watching them than they realized. With just a week before the wedding, I called an emergency meeting with James and our closest friends at our apartment. 6 people crowded around our dining table as I explained the situation: my sister's betrayal, my parents' ultimatum, and now the planned wedding crash. "They've crossed the line," James said, his normally gentle demeanor hardening. "This is beyond disrespectful." My college roommate, Rachel, who had become a corporate event planner, tapped her fingers thoughtfully against her coffee mug. "We need to approach this strategically. Confrontation isn't the answer, it would just create the scene they're hoping for." "Could we change the venue?" suggested Michael, James's best man. "Last-minute switch. Tell only the people you actually want there." I shook my head. "Too complicated, too expensive, and our vendors are locked in. Plus, I refuse to be driven out of the space we chose and paid for." "What about security?" offered James's brother, David. "I have a buddy who runs a private security firm. Very professional, very discreet. They could turn away anyone not on the approved list." The idea had merit, but I hesitated. As much as I wanted to prevent my family from hijacking my wedding, I cringed at the thought of my relatives being physically barred from entering the scandal, the gossip, the inevitable escalation. There had to be another way. "I have an idea," said Aisha, my coworker and friend, who had been quietly listening. "But it's a bit unconventional. And it would require absolute secrecy." As Aisha outlined her plan, I felt a mixture of apprehension and growing conviction. It was bold. It was risky. But it also offered the possibility of not just avoiding disaster, but perhaps even achieving something more meaningful, a moment of truth that could no longer be denied or dismissed. "Are you sure about this?" James asked later that night, after our friends had left. "Once we commit, there's no going back." I leaned against him, feeling strangely calm despite the enormity of what we were contemplating. I've spent my entire life going back, retreating, compromising, accepting less than I deserve. Not this time. The next morning, I made 2 important phone calls. The first was to Detective Sarah Martinez, a college friend who now worked in the Chicago Police Department's white-collar crimes division. "What your sister did could potentially be prosecuted as unauthorized access to electronic information and corporate espionage," Sarah told me after I explained the situation. "The statute of limitations hasn't expired. If your former colleague is willing to provide a statement, and if you have evidence of the login attempts." "I don't want Melissa arrested at my wedding," I clarified quickly. "That's not my goal. I just need to know my options." "Fair enough. But, Emily, what you're describing, it's serious. The kind of thing that can end careers, especially in the legal profession." My second call was to my grandmother. At 83, she remained sharp as a tack and commanded respect within the family. I told her everything, not just about Melissa's betrayal and my parents' ultimatum, but about the planned wedding crash and our countermeasures. "Risky," she commented when I finished. "Bold, but risky. Are you prepared for the fallout?" "I think so. But I need your help, Grandma. I need you to be there, and I need you to bring Uncle Robert." My uncle was a retired judge, still highly respected in legal circles, and the only member of my father's family who had occasionally stood up to him. "Consider it done," she said without hesitation. "It's time someone called your parents on their behavior. I love your mother dearly, but I didn't raise her to play favorites this way." The final days before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations, both for the ceremony itself and for our contingency plan. James and I moved forward with normal wedding activities. The rehearsal dinner, attended by his family and our friends, with conspicuous absences from my side, final vendor confirmations, welcome baskets for out-of-town guests who remained committed to attending. Throughout it all, I maintained a facade of resigned acceptance about my family's absence. To anyone who asked, I simply said they had other commitments, with a practiced smile that discouraged further questions. Meanwhile, Laura continued to feed us information about my family's plans, confirming that they intended to arrive 15 minutes before the ceremony, expecting to pressure me into including them. The night before the wedding, I received a text message from my mother. "We'll see you tomorrow, sweetheart. I'm sure we can put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us." The casual confidence of her tone, the absolute certainty that I would capitulate when confronted, only strengthened my resolve. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, a perfect October Saturday. As I sat in the bridal suite of the venue, surrounded by my bridesmaids, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. Rachel adjusted my veil while Aisha laid out the timeline for the day, including our special contingencies. "The photographer is briefed and ready," Aisha confirmed. "Extra security is in place, but positioned discreetly. Your grandmother and uncle arrived an hour ago and are waiting in the side room as requested." I nodded, checking my reflection one last time. The woman in the mirror looked poised, determined, so different from the eager-to-please daughter who had spent years seeking approval she never received. "It's time," Rachel said, checking her watch. "Are you ready?" "More than ready," I replied, standing up and smoothing the satin of my dress. "Let's do this." As I stepped into the hallway, I could hear the murmur of arriving guests, the soft string quartet playing in the ceremony space. And then, cutting through these gentle sounds, the unmistakable voice of my mother, performatively warm, exclaiming over the decorations, greeting guests as if she were the hostess. I took a deep breath and nodded to Rachel, who slipped away to set our plan in motion. Minutes later, my grandmother appeared, elegant in a powder blue suit, her expression a mix of determination and sympathy. "They're here," she confirmed. "All of them, your parents, Melissa, even your father's partners from the firm. Making quite the entrance. Are you ready, Grandma? This won't be pleasant." She squared her shoulders. "I've been ready to have this conversation for about 20 years, my dear. Don't you worry about me." Together, we walked not toward the ceremony space, but to a small anteroom where, according to our modified plan, the family reconciliation was supposedly going to take place. As we entered, I saw them. My parents standing with perfect posture, Melissa slightly behind them, all three dressed impeccably and wearing expressions of benevolent patience, the picture of a loving family ready to forgive a wayward daughter's tantrum. Emily, my mother, moved forward, arms outstretched. "You look beautiful, darling. I'm so glad we could work this out before the ceremony." I stepped back, avoiding her embrace. "There's nothing to work out, Mom. You weren't invited. None of you were." My father's expression hardened. "Now, Emily, enough is enough. We're here. The family is here. It's time to put aside these petty grievances and proceed with the wedding as a united family." "Petty grievances?" I repeated, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "Is that what you call it when Melissa accessed my confidential work files? When she potentially compromised my professional reputation for her own gain?" "Oh, please," Melissa interjected with an eye roll. "Nothing happened. Your job is fine. You're being dramatic, as usual." "Actually," came a new voice from the doorway, "what you did, Melissa, constitutes several criminal violations under both state and federal law." All heads turned to see Uncle Robert entering, followed by Detective Martinez, who had agreed to attend as a favor to me. "Who is this?" my father demanded, his lawyer instincts immediately activated by the authoritative presence of the detective. Before anyone could answer, Laura slipped into the room, avoiding Melissa's shocked gaze. She carried a manila folder, which she handed to Detective Martinez. "I have copies of the documents Melissa accessed," Laura said quietly, "and evidence of how they were used in the Westridge development case. I also have her text messages discussing how she obtained them." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. My father's face drained of color, while my mother's expression flickered between confusion and dawning horror. Melissa stood frozen, her practiced composure cracking visibly. This is absurd," my father finally sputtered. "Whatever misunderstanding has occurred, this is hardly the time or place." "I agree," I interrupted. "This isn't the time or place. This is my wedding day, which you chose to crash despite being explicitly uninvited. But since you insisted on being here, you can face the consequences of Melissa's actions and your decision to enable and defend them." I turned to Detective Martinez. "These are the individuals I mentioned. I'll let you take it from here." As I turned to leave, my mother grabbed my arm. "Emily, wait. You can't possibly mean to do this to your own sister on your wedding day. What will people think?" I looked at her hand on my arm, then up at her face, the face that had shown me conditional love my entire life. "I think people might notice that I'm not at my own wedding ceremony, which is scheduled to begin in 10 minutes. They're all waiting for me, you know, the people who actually support me and respect my boundaries." Before my mother could respond, my grandmother stepped forward, gently but firmly removing my mother's hand from my arm. "Diana," she said to my mother, "it's time you and Richard listened to your other daughter for once." Really listened. Emily has made her choice clear, and I for one support her completely. She turned to me with a proud smile. "Go get married, sweetheart. This family situation will still be here to deal with tomorrow." I nodded gratefully and headed for the door, then paused to look back at my stunned family. "Detective Martinez isn't here to arrest anyone today. That's not what this is about. She's here as my guest, and to make sure you understand the seriousness of what happened. What happens next is up to you." I met each of their eyes in turn. "I hope you make better choices than you have so far. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a wedding to attend, One where every person present has earned their place through love and respect. With those words, I left the room, hearing behind me the beginning of what sounded like my father's attempt to intimidate the detective, quickly followed by my uncle's authoritative legal intervention. But as I walked down the hallway toward James and our future together, those voices faded, replaced by the sound of the string quartet and the quiet buzz of conversation from people who truly cared about us. Hey everyone, this emotional roller coaster just hit its peak. Can you believe what just happened? I'd love to know your thoughts so far. If you're enjoying this family drama, please hit that like button and subscribe to see how this all plays out. The confrontation you just witnessed is about to lead to something none of us expected, not even me on my own wedding day. I married James in a ceremony filled with genuine joy and love, surrounded by people who had earned their places in our lives. As we exchanged vows, I felt a weight lifting, the burden of trying to meet impossible expectations, of seeking approval that would never fully come. In James's eyes, I saw complete acceptance, and in the faces of our guests, I saw sincere happiness for our union. During the reception, my grandmother approached us, a glass of champagne in one hand and a small, weathered envelope in the other. That was quite a scene before the ceremony, she said, kissing my cheek. Your parents and Melissa left with some of Richard's associates. I think they're trying to damage control. Are you okay? I asked, concerned about putting her in the middle of family conflict. More than okay, she assured me. It was long overdue. But there's something else you should know. She handed me the envelope. I've been holding on to this for years, waiting for the right moment. I think that moment is now. I opened the envelope carefully, aware of James watching curiously over my shoulder. Inside was a faded photograph and a handwritten letter dated 25 years earlier. The photo showed my mother, much younger, cradling an infant, me, I presumed, but the expression on her face was unlike any I'd seen in our family albums. There was tension, a hint of resentment even, as she looked down at the baby. The letter was from my maternal grandfather, who had passed away when I was 10. It was addressed to my grandmother. Diana seems to resent the baby, he'd written. She keeps comparing Emily to Richard's first child with Catherine and finding her lacking. I'm concerned about the pattern developing. Should we intervene? I looked up at my grandmother, confusion clouding my happiness. Richard's first child with Catherine? What does this mean? My grandmother sighed heavily. Your father was briefly married before he met your mother to a woman named Catherine. They had a daughter together, but the marriage ended badly when your father met Diana, your mother. In the divorce, Catherine got full custody and Richard, well, he chose not to fight it. He chose your mother and their future together over maintaining a relationship with his firstborn. I have a half-sister. I whispered, stunned by the revelation. Had, my grandmother corrected gently. Catherine and her daughter were killed in a car accident just before you were born. Your mother was pregnant with you at the time, and the news, it affected her deeply. She became fixated on the idea that your father would always compare you unfavorably to his first child, the daughter he lost. When Melissa came along, she was somehow free of that burden in Diana's mind, a fresh start, untainted by the past. I stared at the photograph, seeing my mother's expression in a new light. She projected her own fears onto me. She was the one doing the comparing. Diana never resolved her feelings about the situation, my grandmother confirmed. Instead of addressing her insecurity, she channeled it into favoring Melissa and pushing you to be better in ways she thought would make your father forget his loss. Does Melissa know about this? James asked. No, my grandmother said firmly. Neither of you were ever told. Richard and Diana agreed to bury the past completely. I disagreed, but I was overruled. I kept this evidence, though, believing you had a right to know someday. The revelation cast my entire childhood in a new light, my mother's constant criticism, my father's emotional distance, the way they both seemed to look at me searching for someone else. The truth didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me understand its origins. Thank you for telling me, I said, carefully returning the items to the envelope. It explains a lot. You deserve to know, my grandmother said. Especially now, as you start your own family. Some cycles need to be broken. As the reception continued, I found myself watching the dancing guests with new perspective. Knowledge didn't heal all wounds instantly, but it provided context that allowed me to view my family's dysfunction with greater clarity. The truth had been hidden for decades, causing untold damage through silence and secrets. Later that night, after James and I had shared our first dance, cut the cake, and thanked our guests, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Melissa. "We need to talk. Not about the wedding. About something else. Meet me at Lakeside Park tomorrow at 2. I showed the message to James, who frowned. It could be another manipulation. Or, I suggested, maybe she's had her own revelation today. I typed a brief response. "I'll be there." The morning after my wedding, still processing both my marriage and the family secret that had been revealed, I met Melissa at the park. She sat on a bench overlooking the lake, her posture rigid, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. Laura gave me copies of what she showed Detective Martinez. She began without preamble when I sat beside her. "I didn't think about the potential consequences for your career. I was focused on winning my case." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Melissa, it was unprecedented. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Was beating me that important?" "It wasn't about beating you specifically," she said after a long pause. "It was about proving myself. Mom and Dad always made it clear that I was the favorite, the golden child. But with that came enormous pressure to be perfect, to justify their favoritism. Every achievement had to be bigger, more impressive. While I was constantly told I wasn't enough," I added. Melissa nodded slowly. Two sides of the same toxic coin. They put us against each other from the beginning. She hesitated, then added, "Uncle Robert pulled me aside yesterday, after everything went down at the venue. He told me about Dad's first marriage, about the half-sister we never knew." "Grandma told me too," I said. "It explains a lot, doesn't it?" "It explains, but it doesn't excuse," Melissa replied, echoing my own thoughts from the previous night. "What I did to you was wrong, Emily. Not just accessing your files, but years of accepting preferential treatment at your expense. I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air between us, sincere but insufficient to erase decades of hurt. Yet it was a beginning, a crack in the facade of family mythology we'd both been trapped within. "What will you do now?" I asked. "About your career, I mean. If this gets out." "I've already contacted the Bar Association Ethics Committee," she said, surprising me. "I'm self-reporting the violation before someone else does. There will be consequences, probably a suspension, possibly worse. But it's the right thing to do." "That's brave," I acknowledged, genuinely impressed by her accountability. "It's necessary," she corrected. "I've been thinking about a lot of things since yesterday. About who I've become, about the values I've internalized. I don't like what I see, Emily. I want to change." We sat in silence for several minutes, watching sailboats drift across the lake. The anger I'd carried for so long hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something more complex, a mixture of grief for what our relationship could have been, cautious hope for what it might become, and determination to break the cycle of dysfunction. "I don't know if we can ever be close," I said finally. "Too much has happened." "I understand," Melissa replied. "But maybe we can start by being honest with each other. No more family secrets, no more pretending." As I left the park that afternoon, I felt neither triumph nor defeat, just the quiet certainty that something fundamental had shifted. The carefully constructed hierarchy that had defined our family for decades was crumbling, leaving space for something new to emerge from its ruins. In the weeks following my wedding, the ripple effects of that day's confrontation spread throughout my family. Melissa faced professional consequences for her ethical violation, receiving a 1-year suspension from practicing law. Rather than fighting the decision, she accepted it with a grace that surprised many who knew her, including me. She used the forced sabbatical to volunteer at a legal aid clinic, working with clients who couldn't afford representation, a stark departure from her previous corporate focus. My parents' reaction was more complicated. Initially, they retreated into defensive silence, refusing to discuss either Melissa's actions or the revealed family secret. My father buried himself in work, while my mother embarked on an extended visit to her sister in Florida, ostensibly to give everyone time to cool down. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received an unexpected email from my father. Formal and stiff, like a business communication, it nevertheless represented his first attempt to address what had happened. Emily, I've had time to reflect on recent events and my role in them. I recognize that my actions and choices, both recent and long past, have caused harm. I am not adept at discussing such matters, but I am willing to try, should you be amenable to a conversation. Regards, Dad. It wasn't warm, it wasn't emotional, but from my father, a man who had spent his life avoiding vulnerability at all costs, it was significant. After consulting with James and my therapist, whom I had started seeing shortly after the wedding, I agreed to meet my father for lunch at a neutral restaurant halfway between Chicago and Milwaukee. The meeting was awkward, punctuated by long silences and halting attempts at meaningful communication. My father, stripped of his usual authoritative demeanor, seemed smaller somehow, less certain of his position in the world. "Your grandmother had no right to tell you about Catherine and the child," he said at one point, a flash of his old defensiveness emerging. "I disagree," I replied calmly. "That history affected my entire childhood, shaped how you and Mom treated me. I had every right to understand why." He stared down at his barely touched meal. "Perhaps. It's difficult to see clearly when you're inside the situation. Did you ever get counseling, Dad? After the accident, after losing your first daughter?" "No," he admitted. "In my generation, men didn't. We were expected to move forward, to be strong for our families. But carrying that grief alone, letting it shadow our family without ever acknowledging it, that wasn't strength. It hurt all of us." My father didn't respond immediately, but when he finally looked up, I saw something I'd never witnessed before, tears in his eyes. "I loved her," he said simply. "My first daughter. I see her sometimes when I look at you. Something in your expression, the way you focus when you're working on a problem. It was difficult. For me too, Dad. Being compared to a ghost I didn't even know existed." We didn't resolve everything in that lunch, or in the conversations that followed over the next several months. Decades of dysfunctional family dynamics couldn't be fixed with a few heart-to-hearts. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of truth that created space for potential healing. My mother took longer to come around. When she finally returned from Florida, she attempted to resume our relationship as if nothing had happened, inviting me to her charity luncheons and asking about home decor for the condo James and I had purchased. When I gently but firmly insisted that we needed to address the underlying issues first, she reacted with hurt indignation. "I've always done everything for this family," she said during one particularly tense phone call. "All I've ever wanted was for you girls to be successful and happy. If that makes me a villain in your eyes, then I don't know what else to say." "Mom," I replied, fighting to keep my voice level, wanting us to be successful and happy wasn't the problem. The problem was that you decided what that success and happiness should look like, and you punished me when I didn't conform to your vision. That's not fair, Emily. I supported your engineering career eventually. Eventually being the key word. After years of making me feel like my choices were second-rate. After explicitly telling me that Melissa was making you prouder by following in your footsteps. There was a long pause before my mother spoke again, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I never realized it came across that way. I thought I was motivating you to reach your potential by comparing me unfavorably to my sister at every turn." Another pause. I need to think about this. About what you're saying. It wasn't an epiphany or a full admission, but it was the first time my mother had shown willingness to consider that her perception of our family dynamic might be flawed. Like the conversation with my father, it represented a tiny crack in a lifetime of entrenched patterns, a small opening that might, with time and effort, widen into genuine understanding. Meanwhile, my relationship with Melissa evolved in unexpected ways. We weren't close, too much damage had been done for an instant reconciliation, but we established a cautious, honest communication that felt healthier than our previous dynamic. During a coffee meeting 2 months after the park conversation, she surprised me with a question. "Do you think we'll ever have a normal sibling relationship?" I considered this carefully before answering. I don't know if normal is the right goal. Maybe we need to create our own version of sisterhood, one that acknowledges our history but isn't defined by it. She nodded slowly. That makes sense. Start fresh, in a way. Not fresh, I corrected. I don't think we can or should erase the past. But we can build something new that takes into account everything we've learned. Throughout this period of family recalibration, James remained my steadfast support. He listened without judgment as I processed each interaction, celebrated small breakthroughs, and helped me maintain boundaries when needed. His own family, warm and functional in ways mine had never been, welcomed me with open arms, showing me what healthy family relationships could look like. 6 months after our wedding, James and I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought joy but also anxiety. Would I know how to be a good parent, having grown up in such a dysfunctional environment? Would our child become a new battleground in my family's ongoing power dynamics? We get to choose what patterns we continue and what patterns we break, James reminded me as we lay in bed one night, his hand resting gently on my still flat stomach. Our child won't be growing up in the same environment you did. I know, I said. But it's scary, the idea of being responsible for someone else's emotional well-being when my own family modeled such unhealthy behaviors. That awareness is exactly what will make you a wonderful mother, he assured me. You recognize the problems. You're already working to address them. The prospect of becoming a parent accelerated my commitment to healing family wounds, not just for my own sake, but for my child's. I didn't want my baby to inherit the weight of unspoken resentments, hidden truths, and conditional love. I wanted to create a legacy of openness, acceptance, and genuine connection. When we announced the pregnancy to my family, their reactions revealed how much had changed in the months since the wedding. My father, rather than offering perfunctory congratulations, asked thoughtful questions about how we were feeling and what kind of support we might need. My mother, after her initial excitement about becoming a grandmother, surprised me by asking, "What kind of grandparent do you want me to be, Emily, for this child?" The question itself acknowledged that she recognized her role would be defined by my boundaries, not her expectations, a significant shift in our dynamic. Even Melissa's response reflected growth, as she offered help without trying to take over, respecting our autonomy as parents-to-be. None of these changes erased the difficult history we shared, but they suggested possibility, the potential for a healthier family system that my child might experience. The broken patterns of favoritism, comparison, and conditional approval that had defined my childhood might end with my generation, replaced by something more authentic and nurturing. As I approached motherhood, I carried with me not just the scars of my upbringing, but also the wisdom gained from confronting and understanding it. The pain had a purpose now. It had taught me what to avoid, what to heal, and what to prioritize in building my own family. Today marks the first birthday of our daughter, Lily Grace Bennett Wright. Our living room is decorated with pastel balloons and streamers, a homemade banner proclaiming, "Happy Birthday, Lily," hanging above the fireplace. The celebration is small, just immediate family and a few close friends, but filled with genuine warmth and joy. As I watch my daughter smash her tiny fists into her birthday cake, squealing with delight at the texture and taste, I can't help but reflect on the journey that brought us here. A year of parenthood has taught me more about myself, about love and boundaries and healing, than all the therapy sessions and family confrontations combined. Across the room, my parents sit together on the sofa, my father documenting the moment with his camera while my mother waits with a damp cloth, anticipating the cleanup that will inevitably be needed. They are different grandparents than I feared. They would be more respectful of our parenting decisions, more conscious of treating Lily as her own person rather than an extension of their expectations. The transformation didn't happen overnight. There were missteps and relapses into old patterns, moments when my mother couldn't resist offering unsolicited advice, or my father retreated into emotional distance when conversations became too uncomfortable. But with each stumble, we found our way back to the path of healing, all of us committed to creating something better for Lily's sake. My grandmother, now 84 and using a walker, but still sharp as ever, sits in the place of honor near Lily's high chair. She has become the family historian, the keeper and sharer of truths, helping us understand the generational patterns that shaped us all. Through her stories, I've learned about my grandfather's stern parenting of my mother, about the pressure my parents faced in building their law practice while raising children, about the complicated grief that shadowed our home after the accident that claimed my father's first family. Understanding doesn't excuse the harm that was done, but it provides context that makes forgiveness more accessible. Not forgiveness that erases accountability, but the kind that allows for moving forward without being anchored to past hurts. Melissa arrives late to the party, coming directly from her volunteer work at the legal aid clinic. Her suspension ended 3 months ago, but she chose not to return to our parents' firm, instead accepting a position with a nonprofit organization that advocates for children in the foster care system. The work pays less, but fulfills her in ways her previous career never did. "Sorry I'm late," she says, setting a gift bag on the table before kneeling to Lily's level. "Hello, birthday girl. Aunt Melissa brought you something special." The word "aunt" still sounds strange coming from her, but the relationship she's building with my daughter is unlike anything I could have imagined a year ago. Melissa has become a steady, supportive presence in Lily's life, not trying to compete for her affection or use her to rehabilitate her image in the family, but genuinely interested in connecting with this new person on her own terms. After the cake has been demolished and presents opened, after Lily has been cleaned up and is happily playing with her new toys under the watchful eye of James's parents, my father approaches me in the kitchen as I prepare coffee. "She has your determination," he observes, nodding toward Lily, who is methodically stacking blocks despite their tendency to topple. "That focus when you're working on something important." In the past, such a comparison might have made me tense, wondering if he was seeing his first daughter in me again, in my child. Now, I can accept it as the genuine compliment it is intended to be. "Thank you, Dad." I think she has James's patience, though. I would have kicked those blocks across the room by now. He smiles, a real smile that reaches his eyes. "Emily, I wanted to tell you something. Your mother and I have been discussing our wills, updating them to reflect changes in the family." Oh. I continue measuring coffee grounds, trying not to show my wariness. Financial discussions in our family have always been fraught with unspoken expectations and conditions. We've decided to establish a trust for Lily's education, similar to what we did for you and Melissa. But we've also set up a separate foundation, the Catherine Bennett Memorial Fund. It will provide scholarships for young women pursuing careers in STEM fields. I look up, surprised both by the name of the foundation acknowledging his first daughter openly for the first time I can remember, and by the focus on supporting women in STEM, my field. That's wonderful, Dad." "It's overdue," he says simply. Acknowledging all parts of our family history, celebrating all the paths our family members have chosen. He hesitates, then adds, "We'd like you to serve on the selection committee if you're willing. Your expertise would be valuable." The offer represents more than just a practical request. It's an acknowledgement of my professional accomplishments, a recognition of my value beyond my role as daughter, sister, mother. It feels like the closing of a circle, healing a wound I've carried since childhood. As the birthday celebration winds down and guests begin to leave, I find myself standing in the doorway with Lily on my hip, accepting hugs and saying goodbyes. James wraps his arm around us both, forming a unit that feels solid and secure despite the complicated family dynamics swirling around us. Later, after Lily has been put to bed and the house restored to some semblance of order, James and I collapse onto the couch, exhausted but content. "That went well," he observes. "Better than I expected, honestly." "It did, I agree." A year ago, I couldn't have imagined all of us in the same room, much less getting along. You made that happen, Em. Standing up for yourself, refusing to accept the old patterns, it changed everything. I consider this not just me. It took all of us deciding that the old way wasn't working, that we wanted something better. Even my parents, in their own way. "Your family has come a long way," James acknowledges. "But I'm most proud of you. You didn't just escape the dysfunction, you helped transform it. You broke the cycle." As we sit in comfortable silence, I think about the journey from that confrontation at my wedding to this peaceful moment. The path hasn't been straight or easy, and we haven't reached some perfect endpoint of family harmony. There are still difficult conversations, occasional retreats into old habits, moments of frustration and hurt. But there is also growth, truth, and the genuine effort to do better, to be better for ourselves and for the next generation. The ultimate revenge against a harmful family system isn't dramatic confrontation or cutting ties, though sometimes those steps are necessary. The true victory lies in healing enough to build something new, something healthier, something that honors truth while creating space for change. It's about recognizing that family loyalty doesn't mean blind acceptance of mistreatment, but rather holding each other accountable out of love and respect. As I look toward the future, Lily's childhood, her relationship with her grandparents and aunt, the family dynamics that will shape her understanding of the world, I feel cautiously optimistic. The patterns that damaged me have been identified, acknowledged, and actively addressed. The silent secrets that poisoned relationships have been brought into the light. The rigid hierarchy that placed one child above another has been dismantled. In its place, we're building something more authentic, a family system based on mutual respect, honest communication, and the recognition that love should never be conditional or used as a weapon. It's imperfect and evolving, but it's real. I look at James, the partner who stood by me through the most difficult confrontation of my life and continues to support me as we navigate its aftermath. Thank you, I say simply. For what? For helping me find the courage to stand up for myself. For showing me what healthy love looks like. For being my family when my biological one let me down. He kisses my forehead. Always. What's your story of family betrayal or difficult boundaries? Have you ever had to stand up to loved ones who weren't respecting your choices? Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your story might help someone else find their voice. If this tale of family karma and healing resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complex relationships. Thank you for coming on this journey with me, and remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately lead to the deepest healing. Until next time.